Hello, license holders, and welcome to One License 201 Live. I'm Dr. Katie M. Deaver, and I have the pleasure of serving as the general manager here at One License. As many of you are probably familiar, we typically hold an annual new user webinar during the first quarter of each year. But this year, thanks to feedback from license holders like you, our team was inspired to create several new webinar opportunities designed to assist license holders at all comfort levels. Today's One License 201 webinar was designed with our intermediate users in mind. Many of you folks have been utilizing our service for quite some time, and you're probably reasonably comfortable with One License is and what your responsibilities as a license holder are. Our hope for today is that we add some new tips and tricks to your One License and copyright knowledge, as well as answer as many of your individual questions as possible. Since this is a 200 level webinar, we are coming to this session with the assumption that you've attended or watched or are at least familiar with the content in our previous new user webinars or the One License 101 live webinar that we held back in February. So if you aren't familiar with those intro level topics, just know that you can always go back and watch those recordings. But today our jumping off point is going to be just a little bit more advanced. Our webinar today will be recorded, and we'll be sharing that recording in our upcoming June newsletter, as well as on our blog, news.onelicense.net. That blog site is an excellent resource for all the latest news from One License, and Madison, who you'll meet very soon, is going to be sharing several helpful links from that blog in our chat throughout the webinar today. And now I'd like to introduce our bilingual ministries specialist, Dave Ventaba, who will share a few housekeeping notes for our time together today.
Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. Whether you're with us live today or you're watching the recording, we're so glad that you're here, and we hope that the information that we're sharing in this webinar will help you to get the most out of your One License permissions. A few housekeeping notes as we begin our time together. This webinar will be no longer than an hour in length. All you need to participate is your speakers or headphones so that you can hear us. There's no need to have a microphone or video camera since you are an audience member today. Feel free to grab a writing utensil if that would be helpful to you, or maybe open up a Google Doc so that you can take notes throughout the webinar today if you'd like. Our time together today will be divided into 4 parts. First, we'll spend some time digging into manual submissions with Siobhan. Then I'll spend some time talking about how to report arrangements. Next, Madison will help us explore how to make and manage lists through the One License portal. And then finally, we'll wrap up today with a live question and answer session at the end. And to tell us a little bit more about that Q&A session, I would like to introduce Madison Connor.
If you are here with us live, you can click on the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen and then type your question directly into that box. We will be monitoring that throughout our time together, and we will do our very best to answer each of those questions live. Over the last few days, we have also received questions from some of you through our online ticketing system, so please know that we will be including many of those questions as well. If you are watching the recording or have a question that is specific to your organization, our online ticketing system is going to be the best and fastest way for you to get in touch with the One License team. You can email us at info@onelicense.net or log into your account and submit your question through the contact link in the upper right-hand corner. One feature of our ticketing system is that if you are logged into your account and send us a message through the contact link, all of your account information, such as license number and the organization name, will all automatically be sent to us along with your request. This is really helpful for the One License team and allows us to find your account much more quickly. Feel free to write webinar in the subject line of your message and know that we will respond by email, typically within 2 to 3 business days. And now I'll hand things over to our assistant manager, Siobhan McGuire, who will kick us off with some information about manual submissions.
Hey, thanks, Madison. Right, so manual submissions. The first thing that I want to say is if it's at all possible for you to find the record in the database and not make a manual submission, that's faster for you. and that's faster for the member publisher, right? If the data is already in the database, then let's use that data and not fill out an extra form. And so with that in mind, I just want to remind you to take another look at that copyright claim. Make sure that you're not confusing maybe publisher for copyright holder or something like that. And then if it's a one licensed member publisher, I'm going to say, look in the database one more time. And the best way to search for most things in the database is by title and contributor's last name together in the title field. That's the best way to search for most hymns, for most choral and instrumental works. If you're talking about maybe a mass setting or another liturgical setting, or for our Catholic license holders, if you're talking about a responsorial psalm, there might be some more search strategies that you'd like to, that you would do well to use. But start maybe with a title contributor search. There are other ways to search the database, but that's often the best one. And then if you don't find the work that you're looking for in the database, maybe reach out to the One License team. We're happy to have a look. We'll ask you to give us the title and the contributors, the composer and the text author and the arranger, if any, right? And the copyright claim. And in that case, because of spelling, and stuff like that, it might be easier if you sent us an email rather than called us. We're always happy to talk to you on the phone, but navigating, or I should say, managing that information is a little easier in an email. So searching by title alone often doesn't yield the best results. So title and contributor's last name in the title field. And then when you look at those results, compare your score or your hymnal page to what you find in the database results. Usually the first 5 or 6, if not the first, is what you need to compare. And you're looking for a match for 3 elements: the title, the contributors, and the copyright holder. And if you get a match for those 3 elements, then you know that you have found a match for your score or your hymnal for the work that you want to use. And you can rely on those permissions and you can report from that database record, right? So double check that it's approved for the permissions that you need, reprint or podcast streaming, for instance. If you don't get a match, then let's talk about that in just a minute. But let's say you get a match for title and contributor only. So the copyright holder is different when you compare your score or your hymnal page to the database. So let's consider that for a minute. You may know that copyrights can change hands. Copyright is a form of property law. So just like you can sell your house or your car, you can sell or transfer copyright claims. There are other ways that copyright claims might be acquired. So consider that as a possibility and look at your score, your hymnal page, and you have a match for title and contributor with the database, but the copyright holder is different. So if you think that it's a match and it's just the copyright claim has changed hands, then go ahead and rely on that and report from that record. If you know it's not the same work, then we know it's not a match. If you're just not sure, the best thing to do would be to contact one of those copyright holders directly, or perhaps both, and ask for clarification. Explain, this is the work that I have, and this is what I'm seeing in the One License database. Can you tell me, is this covered by my One License permissions? And they can clarify that for you. If it's not approved for the permissions you need, you don't want to make a manual submission. In that case, because the title is in the database, the manual submission form is not the appropriate venue for you. You want to contact the member publisher directly. So you need reprint permissions, but it's not approved for reprint. Contact the member publisher. You need podcast streaming permissions for your online worship video, but the record isn't approved. The title is not approved in this record for podcast streaming permissions. Contact the member publisher. And that's another reason to search by title and contributor. In a database of this size, nearly 240,000 records, you might find, pardon me, you might find duplications. And then if there is more than one record, when you're making your match, use the record that is a match for the work you want to use and is approved for the permissions that you need, and then ignore any other records, right? All right, so let's say you've done all you can, you've searched by title contributor, maybe you contacted us, you tried all our suggestions, and to the best of your understanding, it's not in the database. So at this point, you can make a manual submission. You can fill out the form on the website, or if you prefer, you can contact the member publisher by phone or email, and you'll find that information on our website. So let me do a little screen sharing here. Good. So when you fill out the form, so you've made a search and you didn't get any results, or you got some results, but none of them are a match, you can fill out this form. There are some required fields, but not all the fields are required, and you should skip any that don't apply, right? So song title, it's not a song, it's a handbell arrangement, but that's fine, just the title of the work, right? First line, if there isn't a text with this work, if it's an instrumental work, don't worry about first line, but this field is required, and you have to choose one of the copyright holders from this drop-down list. You don't have to scroll all the way down if you're looking for, United Member Publishers, United Methodist Publishing House. You don't have to scroll through 300, member publishers to get there. You can type into this search field, but you can't write in a copyright holder who's not in this list. If one of our member publishers is not found in this copyright holder list, that means that that member publisher is not accepting manual submissions at this time, so you should contact them directly by phone or email. I don't want to, don't hear what I'm not saying. You are contacting a member publisher directly by filling out this form, but you could contact them by phone or email as well. Then you also need to select the report week, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, but the week that you intend to use it, make that selection. And then for additional information, any additional information you can provide to the member publisher so that when they see your form, they can understand which of their works you are asking about. So for instance, if it's a choral octavo and there's a catalog number on that, include that. If this work is published in a larger collection, perhaps include the title of the collection, right? And then, of course, there are other fields to fill out. So fill out all the fields for which you have information and then submit the song. When you, pardon me as I lose my place in my own notes here. Great. So when you filled out the form, what happens next? You'll see your manual submission in your notifications center as a pending submission. So here you are on your account, right? So you see your name and you see that you are logged in, that you have the opportunity to log out, right? This icon here, this bell, takes you to our notification center. And when you click on that, this window pops up. And depending on the size of your screen, you might need to scroll down to see this show all. And that then takes you to your notification center. And the other way to get there is from your home screen, my account, my profile, and then select the notification center. So I have some nonsense reports in here. So I did a manual submission today to H.W. Gray. They're very accommodating and are going to let me leave this here for just a minute to talk to you. So I made my submission is pending. My submission of, title to member publisher is pending. And I can see that pending title in that manual submission in my report weeks. So I go to my account, report usage, and I know that I reported it for June 10th. So I come on down here and I select manage to look at my report, and there's my reported titles for the week. And there's my pending submitted song underneath my reported titles. And I take a look at this, I'm like, oh, I didn't mean to submit that to H.W. Gray. I meant to submit that to, whoever. I can delete this manual submission by clicking on this trash can icon. Okay. So here you are back here. You get a notification when you make your manual submission, and then there's a new notification when the member publisher responds to your request. Some member publishers will also send an email, and their response, they have 4 options. The first is that they can accept your suggestion. So it'll your submission of song, and then it'll say approved here. It won't update this notice. There'll be a new notice. These are all tied to the date that they were made, but there would be a new notice. So approved. So thank you very much. We added that to the database. In future, you can search it by title and contributor. And there's you can click here and it takes you to the reported title. So then the other option that a member publisher has, option number 2, is to substitute for a record that was already in the database. You weren't able to find it, but it was there. So they substitute the record, it's reported into your titles, and going forward, you know that you can search for that title by title and contributor in the title field, right? As you know, each database record is associated, has an associated SKU, a unique song code. So once that title appears in your reports, you can make a note of that SKU for future reference and report with the SKU in the title field, or you can search by title contributor going forward. So both accept and substitute mean you have permission to use this title, and also that it's been reported for the week that you chose in your manual submission form. The third option that the member publisher has is they can pass. So you made a manual submission to one member publisher, and they looked at it and they're like, oh, this isn't our copyright claim, but we know whose it is, and they happen to be a one licensed member publisher. So they can pass the form to that second member publisher. At this point, you still don't have permission. You're still waiting for a response from the member publisher, from the copyright holder. But if you like, you can reach out to that second copyright holder by phone or email if you want to sort of expedite that process, or you can wait for them to respond here in your notification center. And then the fourth option is they can reject. So sometimes they'll give a reason. In this case, GIA, who let me make a manual submission for purposes here, rejected it, and the reason they gave was other, right? So then you can follow up with that member publisher for more information about why that title was rejected. Sometimes we're able to give you a little bit of information. If you want to reach out to us, we can help you interpret whatever information is there. Maybe go back and look at your score and see if you were missing some information, right? And then what's the timeline for this? So each member publisher has their own timeline for responding to manual submissions. Some are reviewing their manual submissions queue a couple of times a month, or even more often, maybe even once or twice a week, and others less often. But I would say if you don't get a manual submission response within 6 to 8 weeks, that's an indicator to me that you probably want to reach out to the member publisher by phone or email. So I would say the 3 things to take away from this are: don't do a manual submission if you don't need to. Much better to find what you're looking for in the database for your sake and for the member publisher's sake. And then check your notifications for the member publisher's response, right? Remember, you're asking for permission and you need an answer. Do I have permission to use this? And follow up as necessary. And thirdly, we are always very happy to help you if you have questions about copyright, if you're trying to navigate a manual submission, if you're trying to find something in the database, whatever, we're very happy to help. So do contact us. Okay, do we have any questions about that? Are we moving on to our next section?
We do have a handful of questions on that. So you did talk a little bit about different member publishers having a different timeline for when they look at those. So we have some questions about what our recommendation is for how far ahead folks should or could send in those submissions.
Right. So that that manual submission form will let you choose a year into the future. That's a rather recent development, maybe a year or two old. And we're kind of loving that. So you could, if you know you want to use it, at the end of the summer or for Christmas or next Easter, you could make your manual submission now and choose that week. I would say give yourself at least 6 to 8 weeks because the member publisher, we're all trying to manage our workloads, right? But if time is tight, then maybe skip the manual submission form and see if you can get an answer by phone or email directly from the member publisher. I hope that's helpful. All right. So now we're going to go to David, and he's going to talk about how to report arrangements.
Thanks, Siobhan.
Yeah.
All right, everyone. Before I start, again, Siobhan said that I'll be talking about how to report arrangements. I'll let you know that we have an incredibly helpful webinar that digs into this topic further on our blog. So Madison will drop that link in the chat for you right now. Perfect. All right, but I will cover the basics here. So a question that we often receive is, Dear One License, I need help finding so-and-so's arrangement of such and such. I'm here to let you know that the answer to this question will always be in the such and such and not the so-and-so. So again, I need help finding so-and-so's arrangement of such and such. We want to focus on the such and such. What I mean is that you'll always want to look at the original text and tune of which the arranger is making their arrangement. For example, if I was looking for Dave and Tava's arrangement of Marty Haugen's All Are Welcome, I want to look at the information and the copyright claim for All Are Welcome, because that's the such and such, right? So we'll want to look at that. If the copyright of the original underlying title, again, is if it's held by a one licensed member publisher, then it's easy, right? You'll just have to report the original title the way that we always do through the one license portal, right? So in my example, looking at the such and such, Marty Haugen's All Are Welcome, I'll look at the copyright claim. I'll see that the copyright claim for All Are Welcome is held by GIA. And then who I know is a one licensed member publisher. So then I'll start, the whole process of searching the database, searching by title and contributor last name, and then I'd report it as I normally do, right? And for further context, arrangements of copyright works typically don't qualify to earn usage royalties for the reprint or the podcast streaming of their arrangement. That's why we want to look at the original underlying work. All right. However, if the original underlying title is in the public domain, then it's a different story. Then we'll want to report the arrangement because the arranger now earns royalties for the use of their arrangement of that public domain title. I'm going to give you a second to let that absorb. So backtrack. We're looking at the such and such and not the so-and-sos. We're looking at the underlying title of which the arranger made his or her arrangement. We're going to look at the copyright claim. If the original title is copyrighted, especially if it's copyrighted by a one licensed member publisher, then we just report the original title the way that we always do, and we don't worry about the arrangement. But if the original underlying text and tune is in the public domain, then we'll look at the copyright holder of the arrangement and try to report that. The same way that we always do, the same way that we've heard about in One License 101. If the copyright holder is a one licensed member publisher, we report it. If we can't find it, we do what Siobhan says, we do a manual submission, all of that. Beautiful things. All right. Now you might be asking yourself, well, how do I know for sure who the so-and-so is and who the such and such is, David? How do I tell the difference? Well, we'll want to look at the words that we see on our score. So it's helpful to pay attention to the wording, right? We'll see terms like words and music by, or arranged by, setting by. So if we see words and music, that'll point us to who the original contributors, the original authors and composers are of the underlying work, right? If we see the terms arranged by or setting by, then we know that that's pointing us to the arranger and the contributors of the arrangement. And for more information on terminology that we at the OL team use a lot, Madison will be dropping a little blog in the chat right now for you all. Perfect. All right. I know I went really fast, so let's look at an example. Katie's going to share a couple of screenshots with you all. We pulled an example of an arrangement of Christ be our light. Yes, perfect. So if we look at this example and we're looking at that terminology that I just mentioned, we see Christ be our light, and on the right side, we see words and music by Bernadette Farrell, setting by Joel Rainey. So now we know words and music by. So now in our heads, we're like, okay, so the original contributor of the underlying text and tune is Bernadette Farrell. So that's the such and such that we want to look at. And then the so-and-so, who is still important, is Joel Rainey, right? So now we have the so-and-sos of the such and such. We want to look at the such and such, which is Christ Be Our Light by Bernadette Farrell. And then we're like, okay, so I need to find the copyright information, the copyright claim of that original underlying text and tune. So I scroll to the bottom of the page, and what do I see? I see something that's too small for my eyes, but that's okay. It says 1993, and this arrangement, 2013, Bernadette Farrell. So Bernadette Farrell holds the copyright for both the arrangement and the underlying tune. So now you're asking yourself, well, great. And then we see published by OCP, right? And then we also see sole selling agent of this 2013 arrangement, Hope Publishing Company. So now there's 3 entities in this copyright claim, 1 license team. What does all of that mean? Who is the most important one? The most important one will always be the copyright holders, who's Bernadette Farrell. This one is a great example to use, and we picked it purposefully because it's kind of tricky. Because sometimes a member publisher administers a copyright on behalf of the copyright holder and is able to include it in our system here at One License on the copyright holder's behalf. So in this case, OCP administers a copyright for Bernadette Farrell. And if you search our database, the way that we always recommend, Christ Be Our Light Farrell, you'll find a database entry in for the original underlying text and tune. So you would just report that. Perfect. So I think that's it. What I'm going to do, a quick recap. If you're looking for so-and-so's arrangement of such and such, we are focusing on the such and such, which is the underlying text and tune of the original work. If that's, and then we start there. Your answer will always lie in that original underlying text and tune. And a fun fact is that this also is true for instrumentals. So if you're looking for so-and-so's instrumental of such and such, we're still looking at the such and such, the underlying tune, the underlying work of which the arrangement is being made. All of that will give us our answers, and it's those that we want to report. All right. Are there any questions?
So you did touch on this briefly and sort of in your overarching themes, David, but we are seeing a couple of questions. So I think we understand that we're supposed to report that underlying copyrighted text and tune, but should we also report the arrangement itself somehow?
Typically, no. So reporting the underlying text and tune typically is enough. because the arranger typically does not make or does not qualify to earn usage royalties for the use of their arrangement. So reporting that arrangement most of the time is not needed, and reporting the underlying text and tune is sufficient. I know it feels weird because we want to make sure that the arranger and the arrangement is taken care of. But again, if they don't earn royalties off the use of their arrangement, then there's no real purpose to reporting that arrangement.
Perfect. Thanks, David. And we had a follow-up question that I think Siobhan is also going to type an answer to, but exactly, right? So arrangers typically are earning their money off the sale of those octavos, but they are considered derivative arrangements. So in our online services, where those copyrighted texts and tunes are going to be heard, that's where we're wanting to report that use under our podcast streaming licenses, so that the original text and tune gets that reported usage credit for all of the ways that we use those in our online services. Perfect. Thank you so much, David. Again, folks, you're welcome to continue sending questions to us in that Q&A box or in the chat. And the four of us are kind of trading off answering those. So just know we see them and we're doing our best to keep up with those as they come in. And now we will hand things over to Madison, who's going to talk a little bit about the list feature in your One License account.
Yes, let's talk about lists for a moment. So lists are a great way to be more efficient with reporting. It's a great feature in your One License account. Building a list allows you quick and easy access to the titles your organization uses most often. You can build as many different lists as you would like, and you can organize them by any theme or topic that would be most helpful for you and your organization. So examples of this could be a liturgical season, a type of service, or even just your most frequently used hymns. After you have built your list, you will then be able to report titles directly from the list rather than needing to search the full database every time. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we can practice building a list together. Alrighty, so you'll want to make sure that you're logged into your One License account to do this. And you're going to go to My Account, Manage Lists. So if you have any lists that are built, they will pop up right here. Currently in this account, there are no lists, so that's why nothing's here. But let's go ahead and create one together. So to create a list, I'm going to click on this green rectangle here where it says Create. And again, you can title this anything that would be helpful for you. Let's go ahead and call this one Favorites. And then I'm going to click Create. So here's my list. Currently, there are no titles on this list, so we're going to go ahead and add them together. But first, I just want to show you up here, you have the option of renaming this title. If, say, you think of something that could be more helpful, maybe Favorites 2024. And you also have the option of deleting the list if you find it's no longer helpful for you. So once you've created your list, now we need to add some titles. To do this, you can either go to your My Account Report Usage page, or you can also return to the One License home screen and search for your titles here. So let's go ahead and add All Are Welcome. So once you find the title that you're searching for, so I searched by title and contributor's last name, I found my title that I would like to add to my favorites list. I'm going to click the + list right here. And then I have the option, I can select the list. So there's my favorites that I just created. Or if I wanted to, I could even create a new list right here. But I'm going to go ahead and add it to favorites. So I have the option of saving and returning to the list page, or I can save and keep searching. So I'm going to save and keep searching, and I'll add one more title. So let's add One Bread, One Body. Oh, I'm sorry, I spelled that wrong. Excuse me. All right, so we're going to add Foley's One Bread, One Body. Again, I'm going to click the + list. I have my list favorites here. I'm going to save, and this time let's return to our list page so we can see what we've done so far. So I'm back on my manage list page. I see my favorites list that I just created, and here are my 2 titles that I just added. So anytime I click on that manage list page, they will be ready to go for me right there. Now, when I'm wanting to report these titles, I have 2 options here. I can use the green report button that's off to the side, or I can use these squares on the left-hand side and add a check mark, and then use the report all selected at the top. So this is great if you have a really long list and maybe you only used 1 or 2 titles in your service and you just want to report 1 title. I can do a check mark, report all selected. Once I click the report button, your familiar report usage screen comes up where you select your dates, the usage type, and the number of services. You have the option of submitting and viewing a report or submitting and staying on that list. Another option here on this page, if you need to, you can always delete the titles off of the list if you find that you're not using them, just by clicking that delete button right there. I'm going to stop sharing here. So that is lists in a nutshell. A couple other notes about lists. We do have a great blog post about making and managing lists that one of our team members will pop in the chat for you guys to access. Also, any user with login privileges, so this could be the account owner or any sub-users, they can access any of your created lists to add titles or report them. So if you're the primary user and you created the list, your sub-users have access to it as well. Songs can be added to the list at any time, so there's no need to try and add every song you use frequently all at once. You can always go back and add more if you think of some later on. All in all, creating lists takes a little extra time and effort up front, but ultimately it can save you a lot of time and planning in the long run. So do we have any questions that we're seeing about lists?
There are a few. So one of the questions was, and I don't actually know if we've tested this out, so we'll see if Madison's guess is the same as mine. Someone is wondering if there's a limit to how many lists you can have in your account.
Yeah, I have never tested that out as well, but I don't believe so. I mean, it's never been an issue in the past. So I think you can go on and create, and then we'll see what happens.
Would be a very happy accident for us to find out that there was some sort of a stopgap on that. So let us know, but yeah, not as far as we're aware of at this point. Perfect. Thank you so much for all of those pieces and all of that information, Madison. I do see a couple of raised hands. We see you. Since it's a webinar, we don't have the ability to let you ask a question. So we'll have to send you over to that Q&A or that chat, and we will be able to connect with you over there. At this point, we will go ahead and go into our official Q&A. We do have a huge variety of questions, probably not surprisingly. Many of them are sort of our basic questions that we hear a lot, right? Those smart search strategies for the One License site. So this one is probably going to head over to Siobhan since it sort of touches on the manual submissions just a little bit. So someone asked, their hymnal isn't listed on the song entry. So they sent a manual submission, but the member publisher replaced their submission, substituted their submission with the entry that is currently in the database. Can you talk a little bit about why that is and what happened there?
Sure. So when you're comparing what you found in the database to the work that you're trying to use, your score or your hymnal page, you really only need a match for those 3 things. There's other information both on the database and in your score or on your hymnal page that it's all very important. But for the moment, those things recede, and only the title, contributor, and copyright holder are the important matches that you need. So the source, the hymnal source, not important, because whatever hymnal a copyrighted work is published in does not affect the copyright claim. I think On Eagle's Wings by Michael Joncas, Father Michael Joncas, and Here I Am, Lord by Dan Schutte is probably in every hymnal, right? But the copyright claim is the same no matter where you find it. So it doesn't matter the source of the hymnal, and it doesn't matter if there's a downloadable file associated with that database record. If you have a match for title, contributor, and copyright holder, then you can rely on that record for your permissions, whichever permissions are in those icons. Maybe somebody could drop that permissions icon link into the chat. So you're looking for a match for title, contributor, and copyright holder, and then you want to double check those permissions. And if you have a match for the permissions that you need, then you can rely on that record for permission to use the work, and you can use that record to report copyright usage so that the copyright holder receives a royalty credit. So when you talk, sometimes you don't hear what you said. Did that make sense? Did I say it all?
Definitely. And clearly manual submissions was a great topic for us today, because I've got another one for you, if you're all right with that.
Sure. I love manual submissions, talking about them. Yeah.
Perfect. So John asks, what happens if a publisher rejects a request or doesn't respond in a timely way? Do I then have to restart the process for a replacement hymn?
Right. So what do I do? That sounds like two different things. Like, what do I do if I get a rejection? Well, look for clarification from the copyright holder who rejected that and see if they can explain to you, either how you asked the question wrong or where you need to go for permission, or reach out to us. Sometimes we can help you just, interpret the context of everything, give us the information about the work you're using, title, contributor, and copyright claim. And, and then we'll look at what the member publisher said about your manual submission and why it was rejected. And we'll see if we can help with that. But if you want to go right to the source, go to the fountain, go to the member publisher and ask for more information. And then if that still doesn't make sense to you, you can come back to us. We don't have the answer to every question, but we do want to help you. And if we don't have the answer, we will at least try to point you in the right direction, right? But what if you don't have permission yet and the service is this weekend or next weekend and you're feeling the time crunch, or, it's a month from now and you're thinking, I'd rather have this answer now, So in that case, you can reach out to the member publisher by phone or email. If you're not getting a response in a way that makes you comfortable, think about some ways that you can work around the need for permission, right? So you probably know that churches can use copyrighted music in a worship service with no additional permissions, so long as they're singing from the commercially published score, playing from the commercially published score, or from memory, right? So as long as I'm playing out of the hymnal and the assembly is singing out of the hymnal, and we're not putting a worship service online, and we're not playing a recording, and we're not, reprinting copyrighted works, then we're good for that in-person worship service. But I wanted to teach my assembly this new ostinato chant, this new Taizé style refrain. And I was hoping for reprint permissions, and I don't have them yet. Well, would your assembly be able to learn that if it wasn't printed in front of them? Like, I think probably everyone knows Taizé's Jesus Remember Me, but let's pretend your assembly doesn't know that. Would your assembly be comfortable if you stood up in front of them before the service and taught it to them by rote? And by the same token, it's a new hymn tune, but we have the text, but we need permission to print the hymn tune. Could you teach that hymn tune by memory to your congregation? Would that work for you? It's not an ideal situation, but does it work for you? If it does, then that's a way to go. And then for online worship, maybe mute the audio. You can use it for your in-person service. But if you want to post the service online, maybe mute the audio at that point so that you're not using that unlicensed work online. For a prelude or a postlude, begin the video late or end it early. No, I don't know. I might have missed one or two options in there, but yeah, just, think creatively. What can I do that doesn't require additional permissions?
Very helpful. Thanks, Siobhan. And truly, anytime you're welcome to reach out with our team. Sometimes we are able to directly connect with those member publishers and get faster responses from them. Or if it's a situation that's a little more complex, they can share some of that info with us so that you know what to expect a little bit more with that timeline, or what is going into that conversation. Other team members, I know you're all typing away and looking at these questions. Does anybody else have a question that we can address live?
I got a question about reporting or how to report medleys. So when it comes to medleys, you want to think about it almost in the same way that you're thinking about reporting arrangements. Except now, instead of looking at one underlying work, you're looking at the works that are included in the medley. So if you have a medley that's 3 titles, that all of which are copyrighted, you'll want to look at the copyright claim on all 3 of those titles, and then report those 3 titles individually. Yep, it pretty much works the same as arrangements. Any other questions floating in the ethos?
See a good one from Shannon. So instead of blogs or videos to look back on, do we have printed out cheat sheets? Great question. This is something a little bit new. And actually, Madison, if you have that PDF link, so the PDF, it should have come as an attachment to your registration reminder as well. That one has sort of specific cheat sheet things for this particular webinar. We also have one that is sort of fast answers to all of our basic questions. That one is, I know it's linked in the 101 webinar. One of us will try and go back on our blog and catch that. But also if you visit that blog, you'll be able to look at that webinar, and that is linked in that. Has a lot of sort of our, most common questions, things that we can answer pretty quickly and that apply to a large number of folks. So those hopefully would be a little bit helpful for you. I am seeing a lot of questions again about some of these smart search strategies. Siobhan, do you want to talk a little bit about our recommendation for searching the system?
Sure. So there's many things to click on, right? And they look so tempting to click on publisher, click on contributor. You can search those ways. I don't think those are ideal. You can search by hymnal and number. And if you get a hit, great. Then, if your hymnal's in the drop down and when you enter that number, you get a result, then you're good. But, I'm searching in the ELW number such and such, and it doesn't come up at all. I'm looking at it on the hymnal page. It's right there. Why is it not in the database? I would switch to that title contributor search. So I have a colleague who always uses the hymnal and number search. And in my experience, most of the parish that I worked in, we worked from many hymnals and used a lot of, single print works, choral octavo type things with an assembly participation piece. So I was in the habit of searching by title and contributor. If you find that when you get your results, you're looking past 5 or 6 records, you need to tighten up your search, right? So just like when you search Google, ignore the first 3 because they're ads, right? The first 3 results are ads. But then you look and you're like, well, that doesn't answer my question at all. How can I reframe my question, right? Well, the One License database is much smaller than the entire internet, right? So the smart search is title and contributor's last name. And then if that doesn't call up a result for you, and you're having trouble finding something, we really are happy to help. There's a special way that you can search for mass settings, and you can find the whole mass setting and some other liturgical settings as well. There are special ways that you would search for a setting of a responsorial psalm, but it doesn't hurt to start with title contributor for those as well. There was a question about reporting the number of services, and we have a blog post about mixed usage reporting. I can drop that link if somebody else doesn't have it handy. All right.
Thanks for sharing that, Siobhan. The other thing I'll mention quickly, and then if Madison or anybody else has other questions, you can have the floor. We do hear a fair amount of questions about how to report when we're also using other denominational resources or maybe planning resources that allow us to access those reprint files. So I am from a Lutheran background, so my congregation uses Sundays and Seasons. Right Series is another one. The Wells out of Northwestern Christian Worship Service Builder. There's a bunch of them. We do have one blog piece in particular that talks a little bit about some of those more popular digital resources that folks use and how our service and those services work together. It really does depend on the service and how your church is using it and all of those good things. So let me just sort of blanket the statement by take a look at that resource, take a look at your terms of agreement with that particular service. For the most part, those denominational services or those planning resources are able to cover a specific set of the music that you're using in those services. And you may still need to come over to our service to report other uses or other titles under that. Very few licensing agencies or planning services or anything like that truly cover everything, since copyright is song specific and not resource or hymnal specific. So it's always a good idea just to double check, make sure that you're accounting for all the copyrighted music that you're using in ways that require licensing. And certainly any questions that you have, our team is happy to help. There certainly are times copyright can change hands and does, or smaller publishing companies can be purchased by larger companies, and our hard copies, right, can't be updated once they're printed. So there are just a lot of those little things to keep track of. On the other hand, right, reporting on one license, it doesn't cost you anything other than perhaps a few minutes of your time. So when in doubt, I would recommend just going ahead and reporting, and then you know that all your bases are covered and you are compliant with all of those necessary pieces. All right, Madison or anybody else have other questions we're seeing that we want to answer live?
We had a question come in recently about finding titles in your hymnal that are not covered and what you are allowed to do with those titles. So if you find a title and it is not covered by one license, of course you are welcome to seek permission to use that title. With your one license, you would not be permitted to live stream that title or reprint it. But if your congregation is simply singing the title from the hymnal, then that would not require any additional permission. So that is something great to keep in mind.
Perfect. Y'all are asking really excellent questions. We have a few different questions about interchanging hymn tunes, hymn texts, all of that good stuff. As you're probably already familiar, those copyrights are you're going to see most of the time a separate copyright for the text and another copyright for the tune. So in our system, I would say a good amount of the time, we all sort of tend to use the same texts and tunes interchangeably. So some publishers will have both on the same entry for you. Other publishers will separate out those two. So go ahead and search the system. If they have it combined and you only use the text, feel free to reach out to our team and we can talk you through that a little more. Some publishers will represent the copyright holder for both text and tune. And so they take care of handling how those royalties are split. Some of them have other ways that they want you to help them keep track of what pieces you're using, but certainly you're going to want to look at the individual copyright of the individual text and or tune rather than always assuming they're only used together. Really excellent questions. All right, I'll do one more that I see just popped up. I know this comes up a lot in my context, and I imagine Siobhan's as well. If I improvise a hymn tune at the piano, do I report the hymn usage? Siobhan, would you like to talk about that one a little bit?
So you have permission to use a copyrighted work as it's written. If it's in the public domain, you can do whatever you want with it. You can bring in the pink elephants. You can do whatever you want with it in the public domain. You don't need permissions. But if it's copyrighted, then you're supposed to be faithful to the work. And to alter the work, you need the copyright holder's permission. So that would be outside the scope of one license permissions. Our permissions don't cover altering a copyrighted work, the member publisher directly. I will tell you the number of public domain hymns that I have on my little list when I need an extra prelude, or, what the ritual action needs some additional time. I go to town, and then I try very hard to play the copyrighted works as written.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you all for asking such excellent questions. If we're not able to get to your question today, please send us an email at info@onelicense.net, or you can log into your account and submit your question through the contact link in the upper right-hand corner.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Siobhan, David, and Madison. I really appreciate all of your care and your support of our license holders and our publishers and our team as well. Thank you to all of our license holders who were able to join us today or who might be watching this recording in the future. We so appreciate your time and attention to these important topics and all of this information, and hope that it'll help you to more easily utilize this service as you continue to serve your ministries. We did mention at the beginning that this webinar was recorded, so that recording should be available on our blog in the next couple of days. And we'll also link that fast facts sort of cheat sheet to that video as well, so you can grab that whenever you might need some of that. The four of us and the rest of the Global One License team wish you and your ministries all the best in the weeks and seasons to come, and have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Take care. Goodbye.